I want to just say this before I start, that if anything that I say sounds like I got any credit in this at all, you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. All I did was take a baton that was handed me and ran a leg in a race. And I handed it off to a guy who's running that thing and finishing, running it faster. And Lamar has taken FCA to a much higher level than we did. He's done a super job. The roots of FCA were here, but man, I mean, the plan has flourished. He's done a super job. So this ministry is all about people, a team of people, and not about one person. But one thing I would like to say is this. I got the chance, the opportunity, the privilege to hear Don McClendon tell that story right there in Kansas City. And he said that when he walked in Branch Rickey's office, he was sitting in a big old leather chair. And he had those owl-looking glasses, you know, you've seen him in the movies. That's the way I guess he looked, with a bow tie. And you could look over his shoulder out of glass and see Brooklyn. It was an impressive sight, and he was blown away. You know, he spent every dime he had to ride that train from Oklahoma to get there. He didn't have a quarter left in his pocket when he got there. And he knew he had 5 minutes, and so he gave his spiel 5 minutes. And then Branch Rickey folded his arms, turned the chair around, and looked out the window. Didn't say a word. And so he thought, I'd be darned if I'm leaving. I came all the way from Oklahoma to give this guy this story, and he turned his back on me. And he waited 1 minute, 2 minutes, 10 minutes. And Branch Rickey turned back around and said, that's the best idea I've ever heard in my life. I'm glad that he didn't leave Branch Rickey's office that day. And I'm glad that Mr. Moore picked up the baton and ran his leg here. Because look at the lives that have been touched by FCA. I mean, it's very appropriate that FCA is in this room tonight. I don't know who had the idea to pick this room, but I can think of things that happened in this ministry, in this very room right here. I remember one time we had a basketball camp here. We had 40 teams, I think. And we packed them all in here and sat them down on the ground. And we had a speaker standing right over there in that corner. And he gave a great invitation. The guy's named Roger Woods from University of Tennessee. You know Roger. First time I met Roger, I almost got in a fight with him. You two were there. You three were there. We were fighting over a ball at FSU basketball camp. I don't know if y'all remember that. I had to separate me and Roger. Ended up being great friends. And he's speaking a few years later at the huddle here. He gives the greatest message I ever heard in my life. He gave an invitation and nobody moved. And there's a little old boy about this tall that was sitting about right here. Blonde-headed boy, looked like Opie Taylor. He was 9 years old, wasn't he, David? He stood up, and he had to step over all of those guys to get up there. And when he did, another big guy from his team, Pierce County High School, followed him. And I bet you 20 guys followed that little boy that night. I have never forgotten that as long as I live. His father was Toby Cruz, who now works for FCA over in the swamps over there, right? That's what he said. Toby Cruz. He was so moved by that night. Just think about that. One day at a camp here, I was walking up the stairs. Kate's Culpepper was coming down from the top. Kate was volunteered to work in a basketball camp. Now, y'all know I love Kate's like a son. It's hard to tell the story. And he said, Coach, I just want you to know something. I said, what, Kate? I thought he just broke something. I didn't know what we were talking about. He said, that message really got me. I think that thing spoke to me. I'm ready. I have never forgotten that. You remember that, Kate? I'm telling you right now, that got to my heart that night. And on it goes about things. Remember the night that Jeff Francoeur spoke at it, and we had a gathering here. Awesome. Guys giving their hearts to Christ all over the place. And that's been the story of FCA. It's about people. It's a way to show Jesus to others rather than having to say it. Now, my headmaster told me he'd give me the day off to come over here, but I'd have to say one thing about him when I was here. named Mark Carlson. So I get the day off and went at the bank. So his words, he says, you know, there's two ways. You can tell people about Jesus, or you can be Jesus to people. FCA is about being Jesus in people's lives, acting in the place of Christ in their lives. And that's what this thing is all about. It's not what we say, but it's what we do. And that's the way to minister to people. That's what it's all about. I remember when I first got to Brookstone, I don't even know who came up with the idea we need an FCA. And I walked out the door. I walked out the door. I had talked with Matt Swift on the phone and says, we need to have an FCA. Can you help us form a board? Can you help us do these things? And Matt said, I'll help you any way you can. But Marty, that's your job. You're the one with the vision. You need to do it. So I scratched my head and thought, dang, I thought he'd say, yeah. I walked out the door and there's Larry Miles. I've never met him in my life. I almost ran into him. And I said, hey, Larry, we want to start an FCA. Will you help? He said, you can count me in. And he's helped how many times? He's given his money, he's given his time, he's done everything for us because he was there. Our first meeting, I think there was only one huddle in town, and that was at Hardaway. We started the second huddle. And we had five people come to that first meeting. And it's grown from that number to what it is today. And when we started forming that board, I went to see Chip Reese. Walked in his office and laid out the plan. And man, Chip whipped out a computer. He started laying it all out. I mean, you name it. The guy's the most organized dude you ever seen. And he had all kinds of charts, and I didn't even understand them, but they looked good. You know? and he said, okay, this is great. This will work. Who you got on the board? And I said, well, right now it's me and you. You remember that, Chip? And that thing grew from there. I remember one time I called Brad on the phone. Hey, Brad, let's go play golf. And we went out and hacked it around at Maple Ridge. And we got to number 4. And I had been talking about FCA. We didn't have a dime in the FCA account, not a dime. And Brad said, you can count on us. We'll give to FCA. And the first donation I got, Brad, was from you. Okay. And thank you for that, man. It meant a lot. I think you shot 90 that day.
That's the first time I ever shot 90.
That
might have been the last time I played.
When I look around the room, I look at Steve, man. Every time I have a problem in my life, I go to Steve Butler. And he's always been that guy who will listen. And he's not judgmental, and he always gives good sound advice. He has been a helper from day one. He's got speakers. I remember one time you flew Coach Bowden in on the plane, and Coach Bowden, it was at a Cascade. Night we had him at Cascade. Coach Bowden comes walking in. You know, you ask Coach Bowden to speak, you know it's going to be 40 minutes. You can tell him to speak an hour, you can tell him to speak 20. He's going to speak 40 minutes. He does it every time. You know? And he came walking in, and the first words he said, hey, nice plane. Thanks for that. You've been a friend to FCA since day one. I don't know what we do with that. And we gave you an award, Impact Award years ago, but not enough, man, for all you've done. And for me personally, I'm just telling you, buddy. We had a banquet, the first banquet we had. Y'all might need to help me remember this. We were somewhere down on what was that Methodist church down there near Aflac? We had a banquet. Kay Gudger was leading the banquet. We got Jeremiah Castile to come in and speak. We thought we were going to have a big crowd, so we had chicken, man. Ken Elson had chicken all over the tables. That baby was looking good. We had like 25 people showed up. And we ate chicken for 3 months. I mean, and you'd run into a board member and they'd say, hey man, I got this new recipe for chicken soup. Bobby was at the first meeting we had down at the Presbyterian Church when we started that thing. You remember Bobby? So this whole thing, this ministry is not about a person. It's not about winning and losing. It's just about people and how you do those people. And after that banquet, we were off and running. And I remember I called on every huddle in this town, and nobody wanted to start a huddle. Not one person. I went through that book that Dickie Clark gave me. I did all those things, said all those words like a salesman, and nobody wanted to huddle. And so I'm discouraged. I sit down and I look up on the bookshelf, and there's this book, and the name of it was The Christian Secret of a Happy Life. And someone had given it to me like 20 years before. I never read it. So I pulled out this book and I started thumbing through there. And I read this story. And this book was written in 1851 by a Quaker. I didn't know it was in 51 until I was halfway through it, because it was so appropriate for modern times. And there's a story in there about a man driving his buggy down a road. And he sees a guy traveling down the side of that road with a big, heavy sack. So heavy, it just kind of burdens him down. And so the guy stops and says, "Hey, friend, you want to ride?" And the guy says, "Sure." And he steps up, he sits down, and he hangs onto that sack. And so he come on and off they go, He said, don't you want to lay your sack down? Don't you want to lay your burden out? And there's room right there. He said, "No, I appreciate the ride, but I'll just hang on to it." Now that's the sin as Christians that every one of us commit. We ask God, and we think we're in that equation when we ask God for help, that we can make it happen. I can go talk to somebody and get them to start a huddle. That's where I was. And it just opened up a whole world to me. And I started praying and letting it happen. And so helped me, one by one, that people started calling, "We want to start a huddle. We want to start a huddle." We signed up every school in this town except one. I hate to say this, but it was Jordan High School. And then one night, we came in this room right here to do a hospitality room for a basketball game. David and I were standing about right here. And Terry Parker walks up. Dan and Terry, they're in there with us since the beginning. And we start telling her that story. And as I'm telling that story to Terry, a guy walks up from over there, and he looks up and he says, "Hey, we're thinking about starting a huddle in our school." And David Spitzman looks at him and said, "Are you, by any chance, from Jordan?" He said, "How'd you know?" And that was the last one, because we put it in God's hands. Because we were on that wagon and hanging on to that sack until that night. So if I've learned anything, we need to trust more in our lives what we lay out at God's feet. Because I know I don't. And I think that's a sin that a lot of us are guilty of committing. And look, I've talked long enough. But here's what FCA is all about. I want to shut up at this story. Years ago, George Washington was riding down this road with his column of soldiers. And all of a sudden it came to a halt. And someone said, "General, there's a tree across the road up there." So he goes up to the front of the column and he sees a young lieutenant sitting on a horse with his uniform dressed nice. And he's commanding, yelling, barking commands that the guys move the tree. Nothing's getting done. So Washington takes off that hat, lays it down, the one that you've seen in the pictures when he's crossing the Delaware. He takes off that coat with all those medals, all the things he'd won in his life, all the trappings of being a leader, he lays it down. He takes off his sword, symbol of his power, and he lays it aside. He gets down looking like a common soldier, free of every of the trappings of being an officer. And he said, "All right, man, heave. Heave." And every time he gave that command, that tree moved a little farther in just a minute. It was out of the way. He puts back on his sword, puts back on the coat, puts back on his hat, jumps up on his horse. And he said to that, rode over to the lieutenant and said, "Next time you encounter an obstacle in your life, I suggest that you get down off your horse." And that's where we are in FCA and in our Christian life. We need to get down off our horse, and we need to help people who need help. And whatever it takes, that's what we need to be doing in our lives. Because it's all about serving. If we could get coaches. And if we could get people to buy into this concept of a coach as a servant leader, it would change the whole world. The coach today is the most influential figure in our society. I don't know why. I'm not trying to brag about it. I'm just telling you it's the facts. Coaches are untarnished for the most part in our culture. And they can do more with kids than anybody, than any preacher. We need to get the word out. We need to become that guy who gets down off his horse and gets in the mix and makes a difference to change people. So tonight, I guess what I'm saying is, let's get down off our horse. I think we can get a lot done. I appreciate very much all of you have done. The last thing I want to say is this. I thought your name was in that original charter about 60 years ago, and I think you must be a lot older than I thought you were. I guess it's another McCluskey. Yeah? Thank y'all. I appreciate it.
Hey, Marty, come back a second. I got you one of those engraved charters as well. Thank you very much.
Oh, man.
God bless you, Marty. We wouldn't be here tonight without you and Ken.